What if the very question you have been afraid to ask out loud is the same question God has already answered? What if the thing you have been lying awake wondering, whether any of it was worth it, whether you made the right choices, whether you were ever truly seen in the middle of all that silence? What if that question is not a sign of doubt, but a sign that you are standing on the edge of something you cannot yet fully see? Sit with that for a moment. Because that question did not arrive by accident, and neither did you. You did not stumble into this moment. You were not scrolling aimlessly and somehow land here by chance. Something in you recognized a frequency before your mind could explain it, and you followed it here. And that following is already a form of faith. That following is already evidence of something alive inside you that refuses to give up even when every outer circumstance has been screaming at you to do exactly that. So let the question land. Have you been through something you cannot fully describe to the people around you? Have you walked through a season so long and so quiet that you started to wonder whether you had somehow been forgotten? Whether the promises that were once burning in your chest had simply expired? Whether the version of you that believed so deeply was naive and young and simply wrong? Have you felt the weight of a life that looked ordinary on the outside while something volcanic was building on the inside, something you could not explain and could barely contain? If any part of you just answered yes, then hear this clearly. That was the test, and God said you passed. Not passed in the way a student passes an exam with a clean sheet of answers and a confident hand. You passed the way gold passes through fire. You passed the way a tree passes through winter, roots going deeper than anyone above ground could see, drawing from sources no storm could reach. You passed, not because you had it all together, but because you stayed. You kept your hand on something when everything in the natural world was giving you every reason to let go. And heaven recorded that. Heaven marked that moment. Heaven said, "This one is ready. This message is for you." Not for the version of you that has it figured out. For the version of you that is still a little bruised, still a little tired in places that rest cannot fully reach, still carrying questions alongside the faith, still showing up even when showing up costs something real. This word was prepared specifically for where you are right now, in this body, in this season, with this particular weight and this particular hope sitting side by side inside you. The divine rise that God has spoken over your life does not begin when you feel ready. It does not begin when the circumstances align or when the opposition finally quiets down. It begins the moment you receive what has already been declared. And that moment is now. This is not a warm-up. This is not a preliminary message before the real thing arrives. This is the real thing. This is the word that was assigned to find you today. If this is already speaking to something inside you, type, "Yes, I am ready," in the comments right now. Let that be your first act of agreement with what God is about to say to you through this message. And if this ministry has already found you at the right moment, know that these messages exist entirely to reach people exactly like you, people who needed a word that saw them clearly and did not flinch. If you feel moved to support the work that makes these messages possible, you are welcome to do so freely through the link available to you. Every contribution, no matter the size, helps ensure that this word keeps going to the next person who needs it just as much as you did today. Now stay close, because what comes next is not a general encouragement. It is a specific unveiling, and it begins with the truth about what you have actually been walking through. There is something that happens to a person when they have been inside a long season of testing, and they do not know it is a test. The not knowing is part of the design. If you had been handed a document at the beginning of the last difficult season of your life, a document that clearly stated the duration, the purpose, the spiritual weight of what was coming, and the precise outcome waiting on the other side, you would not have been tested at all. You would have been performing. And God was not looking for a performance. God was looking for the real you. The you that exists when the scaffolding is gone. The you that remains when the applause has left the room, and the promises feel distant, and the silence stretches longer than you ever thought you could endure. This is why the test never announced itself. It arrived wearing the clothes of disappointment. It arrived wearing the face of delay. It arrived in the form of the door that would not open, the relationship that fractured, the season of invisibility that seemed to have no end, the prayer that went up and came back without the answer you were asking for. And in the middle of all of that, you were not being punished. You were being measured. Not measured against a standard of perfection. Measured for fit. Measured for capacity. Measured for the specific shape of the calling that has been reserved for your life alone. Think about the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis. He was not thrown into the pit because God had forgotten him. He was placed in circumstances that would have destroyed a person whose character was not yet deep enough to carry what was coming. The pit came before the palace. The false accusation came before the promotion. The years of waiting in prison came before the morning when Pharaoh called his name. And every single one of those dark chapters was not a detour around his destiny. Every one of them was a direct road into it. The suffering was the curriculum. The silence was the classroom. The waiting was the weight room where strength was being built that could not have been built any other way. Here is what the test was specifically doing in your life during the hardest stretch of the season you have come through. First, it was removing everything that was not truly yours. There are things people carry for years, identities borrowed from others, approval they were never meant to need, definitions of success that were handed to them by a culture that does not know their name. The test strips those things away, and the stripping feels like loss. It is designed to feel like loss, but what is actually happening is a clarification. What remains after the stripping is the real material, the actual substance of who you are, the irreducible core that God can build something eternal upon. Second, the test was building your capacity for weight. A person cannot carry a heavy assignment on a light foundation. The trials you have walked through were not arbitrary suffering. They were load-bearing experiences. They were building a depth of root in you that will allow you to stand under pressure that would flatten someone who had not been through what you have been through. You do not yet fully understand what you will be asked to carry in the next season. But the season you just came through was making sure that when the weight arrives, you will not break beneath it. Third, and this is perhaps the most important thing, the test was proving something. Not proving it to God, because God already knew. Proving it to you. Proving to you that you are more resilient than you thought. Proving to you that your faith is not fragile. Proving to you that the thing inside you that kept getting back up, kept choosing trust over bitterness, kept holding on to the thread of promise even when the full tapestry was invisible, that thing is real. That thing is not wishful thinking. That thing is the mark of someone who has been chosen and sealed and prepared for a specific assignment that this world is waiting for. The wilderness in the Bible was never a mistake in anyone's story. Moses spent 40 years in Midian before God spoke to him from the burning bush. David spent years running from Saul before he ever sat on the throne. Jesus himself was led by the Spirit into the wilderness before he began his public ministry. The wilderness is not the end of the story. The wilderness is the last chapter of the preparation. And when the wilderness ends, it does not end quietly. It ends with a commissioning. It ends with a word from heaven that says, "Now, go, you are ready. Rise." That is the word that has been spoken over you. That is the verdict that this message is here to confirm. You did not just survive your season. You graduated from it. And what waits on the other side of your graduation is not more wilderness. What waits is the rise. While you were in the middle of your waiting season, there was activity happening that your natural eyes could not access. This is the part that the enemy worked hardest to hide from you, because if you had been able to see it clearly during the darkest stretches, the discouragement would not have found the grip it was looking for. The lie that was being whispered into your silence was a simple one. Nothing is happening. You are stuck. You have been forgotten. The promises were not real, or they were real for someone else. And that lie was strategic, because the truth was the exact opposite. The truth was that in the season when the least was visible, the most was being built. Think about what happens beneath the surface of the earth before a harvest. There is an entire world of activity that the eye above ground cannot see. Roots are going deeper. Nutrients are being drawn upward. The structure that will eventually support everything visible is being assembled in the dark. And if you were to look at a field during that subterranean season, you might conclude that nothing is happening. The ground looks bare. The evidence is absent. But the farmer who planted the seed does not conclude that nothing is happening. The farmer knows that the absence of visible evidence is not the absence of real activity. The farmer knows that what is happening beneath the surface is the most important work of all. God was the farmer in your season, and you were not being neglected. You were being grown. In the silence, God was doing 5 specific things in you that are only possible in silence. He was deepening your discernment. The noise of a busy, validated, publicly successful season is not an environment in which a person learns to hear the quiet voice of God. The stripping away of the noise was not cruelty. It was a gift to your ears. It was training your spiritual hearing to recognize a frequency that most people are too distracted to detect. You have emerged from this season with a sensitivity to the Spirit that people who never walked through the quiet cannot access. You will hear things others miss. You will sense things others walk past. That is not a small thing. That is a profound and irreplaceable gift. He was clarifying your assignment. Busy seasons scatter your attention. The waiting season narrowed your focus in ways you may not have noticed yet. Things that used to seem important gradually lost their pull. Things that used to distract you stopped being interesting. What remained at the center, the thing you kept returning to even in the silence, the vision or the calling or the sense of purpose that refused to leave even when everything around it was stripped away, that is the clarified core of your assignment. The wilderness did not take your purpose from you. It removed everything that was competing with your purpose, so that your purpose could finally be seen clearly. He was healing what could not be healed on the surface. There are wounds that only surface in stillness. There are patterns of thinking, beliefs about your own worth, fears about your own adequacy, old agreements made in pain that needed to be identified and broken, and none of that deep interior work can happen while a person is in constant motion. God used the quiet not just to prepare you for what is ahead, but to heal you for it. You are not entering this next season as the wounded version of yourself that began the last one. Something has been set right inside you. You may not be able to name every piece of it yet, but you will feel its effect when you step forward. He was positioning the people and the resources. While you were waiting, God was not waiting. God was moving people into position. God was aligning circumstances. God was preparing the relationships, the open doors, the convergences that your next season will require. Destiny is never a solo construction. It always involves other people, other assignments intersecting with yours at the right moment. And those intersections require coordination that happens long before the moment of meeting. What looks like a sudden connection or a sudden open door in your near future will not actually be sudden. It will be the culmination of a long and careful arrangement that was set in motion during the very season when you felt most alone. He was establishing your authority. There is a kind of authority that cannot be taught in a classroom or conferred by a title. It is the authority that comes from having walked through something and come out on the other side with your faith intact and your character proven. When you speak in your next season, people will feel something in your words that goes beyond the words themselves. They will feel the weight of what you have carried. They will sense the depth of what you have survived. And that weight, that depth, will be the thing that causes your voice to carry in rooms and conversations and moments that matter. God was not withholding your platform in the last season. God was building the foundation that your platform will stand on. If this word is landing in the real place, the place that has been waiting for this specific confirmation, then type, "I choose my crown," in the comments right now. That is your declaration that you receive what has been prepared for you. This ministry exists because people who have been touched by this word choose to help carry it further. Your support, given freely and from the heart, is what makes it possible to prepare and release a new message every week, to keep the quality of this work consistent, and to reach the thousands of people who are still out there waiting to hear something that speaks directly to them. If you feel led to be part of that, the link is there for you. There is no pressure and no expectation, only gratitude for those who choose to give. There is a moment in the story of every chosen life when heaven issues a ruling. It is not always a dramatic moment from the outside. It does not always arrive with thunder or a visible sign or a room full of witnesses. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, as a settled knowing that something has shifted, something has been decided, something that was in process is now complete. And if you are honest with yourself right now, something in you already sensed that this moment was close. Something in you already felt the change in the atmosphere before this word arrived to name it. That sensing was not wishful thinking. That was your spirit receiving a signal from heaven before your mind had the language for it. The verdict over your life has been declared. Let that land, not as a vague spiritual encouragement that sounds beautiful but evaporates before the day is over. Let it land as a concrete, permanent, irreversible reality. Heaven looked at your life. Heaven looked at what you chose when you could have chosen bitterness. Heaven looked at the moments when you stayed faithful in the small and the unseen, when you kept your integrity when no one was watching, when you chose to believe the promise, even when the evidence pointed the other way. Heaven looked at all of it and issued a ruling. And the ruling was this: you are ready, you have passed. The season of testing is over, and the season of rising has begun. The Bible is full of these moments, these turning point declarations that redirect the entire trajectory of a person's life. When God spoke to Abram in Genesis chapter 12, telling him to leave his country and his people for a land he had not yet seen, that was a verdict. When the Lord appeared to Gideon, who was hiding in a winepress, and called him a mighty warrior, that was a verdict pronounced over a life that had not yet caught up to what heaven had already decided. When Jesus stood up in the synagogue in Nazareth and read, from the scroll of Isaiah, saying that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and that the acceptable year of the Lord had come, he was not announcing a future event. He was declaring a present reality that was already sealed in heaven and was now breaking into the visible world. Now here is what the declaration means practically for how you move from this day forward. It means that you no longer have permission to stay in the posture of the tested one. The tested one hunches forward. The tested one carries the weight of uncertainty about whether they are enough. The tested one is always watching for the next blow, bracing for the next disappointment, wondering whether the season will ever turn. That posture served a purpose in the season it belonged to. It kept you humble. It kept you dependent on God rather than on yourself. But it is no longer your assigned posture. The season has changed, and a changed season requires a changed posture. The posture of the rising one is different. It is upright. It is forward-facing. It is not arrogant because the rising one knows that everything they carry was given to them, not manufactured by them. But it is confident because the rising one has received the verdict of heaven and has decided to agree with it. You are not being asked to pretend that all the challenges are behind you. You are not being asked to perform a kind of triumphalism that is disconnected from the reality of your life. You are being asked to receive a declaration and let that declaration change the way you walk. When a person receives a verdict in a courtroom, they do not leave the room and continue to act as if the case is still undecided. The verdict changes their reality immediately. It changes what they are authorized to do. It changes what they are authorized to claim. It changes the posture of their body and the direction of their steps. That is what this word is asking of you today. Not performance, not pretense. Simply the decision to walk in agreement with what has already been declared. There is also something important to understand about the weight of this moment. Verdicts in the Spirit carry a time dimension. There is a window in which the declared word and the lived reality come into alignment. That window requires your active participation. It requires that you receive the word, agree with it, speak it over yourself, and begin moving in the direction it points. A verdict that is received but not acted upon does not disappear, but it can be delayed. And delay in this season is not something you can afford. The world is waiting for what has been placed inside you. The people who need what you carry are already waiting, and heaven is asking you to step into what has already been declared with the full weight of your agreement and your obedience. This is the moment, not a moment like it. This specific, unrepeatable, divinely arranged moment. Receive the verdict, stand upright beneath it, and begin to move. When most people imagine the divine rise that God promises to His chosen ones, they imagine something that looks like the world's idea of success, but faster and with a spiritual glow around it. They imagine the sudden unopening of every door, the immediate recognition of every gift, the rapid accumulation of everything that was previously withheld. And while God is absolutely able to move quickly, and while breakthrough can arrive with a swiftness that leaves the natural mind struggling to keep up, the divine rise that has been spoken over your life is something far more substantial and far more unshakable than a fast version of worldly success. And you need to understand what you are actually stepping into before you step into it. Because if you misread the shape of your elevation, you will miss the real glory of it while you are waiting for something that looks different. The divine rise is first and foremost an internal reality before it ever becomes an external one. This is the part that surprises people who have been waiting for outer confirmation. The rising that God has declared over your life does not begin when the opportunity arrives or when the platform expands or when the visible evidence catches up with the promise. It begins the moment you know, in the deepest part of yourself, who you are and whose you are, and you refuse to negotiate that knowledge with anyone or anything. The first evidence of your rise is not something the outside world will be able to see immediately. It is the quieting of the internal war. It is the settling of the question of identity. It is the moment when you stop auditioning for approval and start walking in assignment. This matters deeply because the enemy is sophisticated enough to know that if he can keep you focused only on the outer evidence, he can keep you in a cycle of reaching and doubting indefinitely. But if the foundation of your rise is internal, if it is rooted in something no external circumstance can alter, then there is no attack that can take it from you. The ground beneath your elevation is the declared word of God over your life, and that word does not flex under pressure. That word does not erode under delay. That word does not diminish because someone failed to recognize your value or because a door closed before you expected it to. The internal rise is permanent, and everything external will, in time, conform to it. The second thing you need to understand about your divine rise is that it will look like servanthood before it looks like authority. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive part of the pattern, but it is consistent across every truly chosen life in the biblical record. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 20, verse 26, that whoever would be great among you must be your servant. He did not say this as a temporary instruction for a particular cultural moment. He said it as a description of how the kingdom of God works, permanently and without exception. The rise that is real and lasting is always the rise that passes through the doorway of service. The person who is truly chosen does not rise above their calling, they rise into it. And the shape of that calling is always, at its core, about what you are able to give to others, not what you are able to receive for yourself. This means that in your next season, some of the clearest signs of your elevation may not look glamorous at first. They may look like being trusted with a responsibility you did not ask for. They may look like being placed in a position of influence in a room that does not seem important yet. They may look like a quiet commission to reach a specific group of people in a specific way. Do not despise those beginnings. Do not measure the glory of what God has given you by how impressive it looks on the first day. Measure it by the depth of the assignment and the permanence of the foundation. What is built on the Word of God over your life will outlast everything built on human ambition and favorable circumstances. The third dimension of your divine rise is that it will be marked by supernatural convergence. This is where the external evidence begins to catch up with the internal declaration. In the season you are entering, you will begin to notice that things are lining up in ways you did not engineer. Doors will open that you did not knock on. People will appear at the right moment, carrying exactly the piece of the puzzle that was missing. Resources will arrive from directions you did not anticipate. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is the visible expression of the invisible work that God has been doing during your entire waiting season. And when that convergence begins, you must meet it with a particular kind of readiness. Not a frantic, anxious reaching, a grounded, expectant receiving. There is a difference between the person who chases every open door in a panic and the person who steps through the open door that was prepared for them with calm and authority. You are being called into the second kind of readiness. A readiness that is not desperate because it is not based on scarcity. A readiness that is not frantic because it is rooted in the settled knowledge that what God has declared over your life is already done. You are not fighting for a future that is uncertain. You are stepping into a future that has already been sealed. Your rise will look like you, fully yourself, fully aligned, fully alive to the assignment that was written over your life before you were born. It will not look like anyone else's rise. It will not follow anyone else's timeline or anyone else's shape. And that is exactly as it should be, because you were not created to replicate someone else's calling. You were created to inhabit your own, completely, without apology, without shrinking, and without delay. There is a reason that the resistance in your life has not fully stopped, even as you have received this word. There is a reason that even in a season of declared breakthrough, there is still something pushing back, still something that seems to work against the forward motion, still something that rises up with noise and friction exactly when the momentum of your calling begins to build. And here is the truth that will change the way you read that resistance forever. The enemy does not fight what he is not afraid of. He does not deploy his heaviest opposition against lives that pose no threat. The specific quality and intensity of the warfare you have experienced is itself a map of your significance. Think about this carefully. When is a fortress attacked most aggressively? Not when it is weak and already falling. It is attacked most aggressively when it is strong, when it is a genuine threat to the plans of the opposition, when taking it down would make a real strategic difference. And you, right now, coming through the end of a long testing season, with your faith intact and your character proven in your assignment, beginning to break through into visibility, you are exactly the kind of fortress that the enemy knows he cannot afford to ignore. So he makes noise. So he creates friction. So he whispers that the resistance proves you are moving in the wrong direction. He is lying. The resistance proves the opposite. In the book of Daniel, we find a passage that pulls back the curtain on the spiritual mechanics of what happens when a chosen person prays and waits and presses through. Daniel had been fasting and praying and seeking God for 21 days when an angel finally appeared to him and said that from the very first day, Daniel had set his heart to understand and humbled himself before God. His words had been heard. The delay was not a denial. There was a battle in the unseen realm. The prince of Persia had withstood the messenger for 21 days. The resistance was real. The warfare was genuine. But the verdict had already been issued from heaven on day one. The fight was over the delivery, not over the decision. And on day 21, the breakthrough arrived. You are standing in your own version of that 21st day. The verdict was issued over your life when you first set your heart. The resistance you have been experiencing has not been a sign that heaven changed its mind. It has been the evidence of warfare over the deliveries of something that was already decided. And just as Daniel's breakthrough arrived, not because he fought harder, but because he held on long enough, your breakthrough is arriving because you did not let go. You stayed in the prayer. You stayed in the faith. You stayed in the position of receiving even when nothing visible was changing. And heaven is now saying, it is time. The delivery is breaking through. This is also why the enemy intensifies his efforts precisely at the moment of transition. The transition from the tested season to the rising season is the most spiritually significant threshold you will cross in this chapter of your life. And the enemy knows what is on the other side of that threshold. He knows what your assignment will cost him and what it will mean for the people you are called to reach. He knows that once you step fully into the clarity and authority of what has been prepared for you, the damage to his plans will be significant and lasting. So he throws everything at the threshold. He creates confusion at the exact moment you need clarity. He amplifies doubt at the exact moment faith is about to harden into certainty. He brings old wounds back to the surface at the exact moment you need to be walking in the freedom of what God has already healed. Do not be deceived by the timing of this resistance. It is not a sign that you read the season wrong. It is not a sign that the word you received was false. It is not a sign that you are moving in the wrong direction. It is a sign that you are moving in exactly the right direction, and that the opposition knows it. The friction at the threshold is confirmation that the threshold is real, and that what is on the other side of it is worth defending. Here is your instruction for what to do with this resistance. Do not engage it on its own terms. Do not enter into a prolonged argument with the doubt or the fear or the opposition. Acknowledge that it is present. Do not pretend that the pressure is not real, but do not give it your full attention. Give your full attention to the verdict that has been declared, because chosen people are not people who never feel resistance. Chosen people are people who feel the resistance and move anyway. They are people who have learned, sometimes through years of painful experience, that the presence of opposition is not a stop sign. It is a confirmation. And every step they take through the resistance is a step that compounds the authority they carry into the rooms and relationships and assignments that are waiting for them on the other side. The enemy already knows you have passed the test. Now it is time for you to walk like you know it too. This is the moment, not tomorrow. Not when the circumstances have fully rearranged themselves to look the way you imagined they would when the season finally turned. Right now, in this moment, with the word still alive in the air and the declaration still fresh in your spirit, this is when you take the first step of the rest of your life as the person God declared you to be. You have heard the word. You have received the confirmation. You have been shown the anatomy of the test, the activity of the hidden season, the weight of the verdict, the shape of the rise, and the truth about the resistance. And all of it was pointing toward this single, irreducible invitation. Step into what has already been declared. You have been practicing that kind of faith for longer than you realize. Every time you chose not to become bitter, every time you helped someone else, even when you were the one who needed help. Every time you stayed in the room with God, when every outer evidence suggested that God was not answering. Every one of those moments was a step of agreement, and they accumulated. They accumulated into the character and the depth and the authority that you are now carrying into a new season. You did not arrive here empty. You arrived here weighted with the substance of a faith that was tested and held. Now the question is not whether you are ready. You are ready. The question is whether you will receive the readiness that has already been built into you and step forward with it, not someday, now. Because the people who need what you carry are not waiting for you to feel perfect. They are just waiting for you to show up, and showing up imperfect and marked by the fire, and carrying the depth of a person who has come through something real. That is exactly the version of you that God prepared. That is exactly the version of you that this world is waiting for. There is a phrase that appears in different forms throughout the scriptures, and it always comes at the moment of divine commissioning. It appears to Moses at the burning bush. It appears to Joshua at the Jordan. It appears to Esther in the palace. It appears to the disciples in the upper room. The phrase is simply this: go now. The preparation is complete. The season of waiting is over. The verdict has been issued. The path is open. Go. That is the word over you today. Go. Not in a frantic rush, but in the settled confidence of someone who knows they are sent. Not in the anxious energy of someone who is still trying to prove themselves, but in the quiet authority of someone who has already been approved. Go into your relationships with the depth that this season built in you. Go into your calling with the clarity that the stripping process produced in you. Go into the rooms and conversations and assignments that are waiting for you, with the weight of a person whose character has been tested and whose faith has proven itself, and whose God has said, "This one is ready." Type I. Receive it in the comments right now. That is your declaration. That is your agreement. That is your first public step into the season that has already been prepared. If today's message has meant something to you and you would like to support the work behind it, you are warmly welcome to do so. Your generosity helps this ministry keep showing up week after week for everyone who needs it. The link is available to you freely, without obligation, and with deep gratitude. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do that now. Stay connected to the flow of what God is releasing through this ministry. There is more coming. There is always more. And you do not want to miss what has been prepared for the next season, because it was prepared with you in mind. You came here today carrying something. Maybe you could name it. Maybe it was more of a weight than a word, something pressing on the inside of you that you have been waiting for someone to acknowledge without minimizing it. And this word was sent to do exactly that. To see you, to name the season you have been in, to speak clearly into the silence that has stretched longer than you thought you could hold. But more than that, this word was sent to close a chapter and open a new one. The chapter that is closing is the chapter of the test. You passed. That is not a motivational phrase. That is a declaration from the God who designed the test, who watched every moment of it, who recorded every choice you made when the right choice cost you something, and who said at the precise moment this word found you, enough. It is done. You are ready. Rise. And the chapter that is opening is the chapter of the divine rise. The rise that begins inside before it manifests outside. The rise that looks like servanthood before it looks like authority. The rise that is marked by supernatural convergence and confirmed by the opposition of an enemy who knows exactly what your assignment is going to cost him. The rise that is yours not because you earned it and not because you are perfect, but because you stayed, because you endured, because the faith inside you refused to die, even when everything around it was pressing in. Take this word with you when you leave, not as a memory of a message you once heard. Take it as a living reality that you carry into every room, every conversation, every decision, every moment of doubt that will try to revisit you and claim that the verdict was not real. When it comes, and it will come, go back to this moment. Go back to the settled knowing that landed in you today. Go back to the declaration I passed. My rise has begun. God said so, and what God has declared is not subject to revision by circumstance, by opposition, by delay, or by the loudest fears that memory can produce. You are the chosen one this message was sent for. You are not a casualty of the season you just came through. You are a product of it, shaped and proven and prepared in ways that will become increasingly clear as you step forward. Your story is not over. It has just reached its most important turning point. And from this turning point, the trajectory is upward, inward toward greater depth, outward toward greater reach, and forward into the fullness of everything that was written over your life before you were born. Go, you are ready. The rise begins now.